Good morning once again and welcome back. It's still Daybreak Africa, reaching you first studio saying on those city. I'm Ezekiel Ogar. This morning we'll be talking on the verdict passed on the 8th governorship election petition. But before we go into details this morning, let's talk briefly as regarding the rulings. Now for Kano Plateau, the Supreme Court reversed the sack of Governor Abba Yusuf of Kano State and that of his counterpart in Plateau State, Mr. Caleb Mutfwang. The Apex Court also upheld their appeal and set aside the judgment of the Court of Appeal, which removed them from office. Both Governor Yusuf and Governor Mutfwang were ordered to vacate office on account of irregularities in the conduct of elections that brought them into power. Now, so far, I think the Apex Court tends to do justice to that, because I to the people of Kano State and Plateau tend to be jubilating real hard for that verdict now. And over to the West, Lagos State to be precise, the panel of justices of the court affirmed the election of Governor Babajide Sanwo-Olu of Lagos State. Justice Mohammed Garba, who read the lead judgment, dismissed the appeal filed by Labour Party and the PDP. Now, according to the Apex Court, the appeal of the Labour Party candidate lacked merit and was consequently dismissed. The court dismissed allegation of dual citizenship of the Deputy Governor of Lagos State, which the appellant relied upon. And back to the north in Bauchi, the Apex Court also declared Governor Bala Mohammed of Bauchi State as the validly elected governor of the state. Both the tribunal and Court of Appeal had dismissed Sadiq Abubakar of the EPC's appeal against the governor's election for lacking in merit. I think we tend to have so much when it comes to the north today. And to Zamfara Governor Dauda Lawal of the PDP also escaped being sacked by the court as his election was also validated. The court said the former governor Matawali failed woefully to establish the allegation of overvoting. And for the East Ebonyi State, I think the people of Ebonyi tend to really rejoice over this word, Ebonyi and Abia. Abia to be precise. Yes, actually. Now, for Ebonyi State, Governor Francis Inwi Furu got the nod of the court as the duly elected governor of Ebonyi State. According to the court, the appeal lacked merit and was accordingly dismissed. Justice Tijami Abubakar, who delivered the lead judgment, said the appellant failed to substantiate his claim of irregularities in the election. And to Abia State, the Supreme Court also affirmed the election of Alex Oti as the governor of Abia State. The Apex Court held that there was no legal basis to tamper with the concurrent findings of the Abia State Governorship's Elections Petitions Tribunal and the Court of Appeal, which earlier upheld Oti's election. Now, somehow Nigerians tend to react more when it comes to the Kano State verdict and that of Plateau. But for me, I think Abia State should be actually given that level of attention. You know, it's more like the voice of the people were heard, and then even the Apex Court has to actually fall in line, you know, agree to that. Now, before we go into the question and answer, of course, we have a guest in the house, President of Sam Olorunfemi, a friend of the house, who is here to actually discuss with us on this topic. But before I go into the Q&A and to get a better understanding, what's your take as to the verdict so far from the Apex Court? Do you think it is just? Do you think it is fair? Do you think it's worth it? And considering the time length, you know, from last year down to this point, 2024, we're still dealing on court cases. What's your take generally?
Well, good morning, Michael. Good morning, Ezekiel.
Good morning to you.
Thanks for having me once again. And I think all this legal tussle, when it comes to post-election litigation, started way back year 2003. Between Peter Obi of Anambra and Dr. Chris Ngige. I think that was the first time we'll be having post-election litigation in Nigeria, when Peter Obi challenged the election that brought in Dr. Chris Ngige as the governor of Anambra State in 2003. That election was challenged by Obi under ABGA party, and down to the Supreme Court. At the end of the day, Supreme Court affirmed that Peter Obi duly won that particular 2003 election in Anambra State, and that was how Ngige was removed from office. So since then, we'll be seeing a trajectory of post-election litigations in Nigeria. But when we look at this, the last election, I'm talking about 2023 general election, in history and statistics, I did my analysis. I discovered that in the history of post-election litigations in Nigeria, we had highest number of post-election litigation in Nigeria in the last general election, starting from the presidential election that ended at the Supreme Court, down to the National Assembly election, even state House of Assemblies election. Some people went to court. I'm talking about state assemblies election now, not to talk of National Assembly election. We saw some of our elected lawmakers who have taken oath of office now being removed from office. The one that is very common now, that of Kogi Central, if I'm right now, Natasha Akpoti, and that of APC. So it's not new in Nigeria, but what is coming and new now in Nigeria is that, unlike before, we did not see any upturn of any of the governorship election now in Nigeria. Now, we have, in fact, virtually all governorship elections that were decided in 2003. Let me say about 90 to 95% of them were challenged in court. Lagos State challenged in court. Ogun State, we are yet to hear the verdict of Ogun State between Dapo Abiodun now and Adebutu in court. Don't forget even that of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde, the Osun State between Adeleke and Oyetola. Now on and on, eastern part of the country, northern part of the country. But out of this post-election litigation, governorship election, I think the one that really plays a lot of concerns on Nigeria happens to be the issue of Kano governorship election. When you look at Kano governorship election in 2023 election, NNPP won presidential election in Kano. As a matter of fact, Kwankwaso happens to be the only presidential candidate in 2023 that moved beyond threshold of 1 million votes in Nigeria. Other presidential candidate, Bola Tinubu, okay. Generally now, I'm talking about at the state level. At the state level now. So others now, they did not move up to that particular, but generally now, Tinubu 8.something million, Atiku 6.1 million, obese, but at the state level now, you see Kwankwaso moving beyond that threshold. And at the end of the day, when the governorship election was held in Kano, NNPP governorship candidate Yusuf was declared winner of that particular election, but the case was challenged in court. But what is raising concerns now in Nigeria is that you will see tribunal giving verdict. You will see appeal court giving another verdict. Then you see Supreme Court giving entire verdict. Although we have it in our constitution as enshrined in the constitution, we have the hierarchy of court in Nigeria. We know that apex court, that is Supreme Court, happens to be the final arbiter that decides any case, and any case decided at the Supreme Court, you have nowhere to go again, and that is the final judgment.
Which actually brings me to my first question. Actually, now we understand the apex court tends to set aside the judgment for both governor
Plateau and Kano,
exactly, respectively. And I tend to wonder, with the Court of Appeal, with the apex court actually setting aside that judgment from the Court of Appeal, don't you think this tends to actually taint the image of the Court of Appeal? Tend to actually question their trust and credibility?
Ezekiel, I was about going there. What led us to this issue of post-election litigation happens to be the kind of the interest that electorate don't have again in INEC. Before, we believe that INEC, once they conclude the election, they announce result, nobody should challenge it. As a matter of fact, as enshrined in the Constitution and Electoral Act, INEC saddled with the responsibility of conducting election and announcing the winner of the election. So literally, we believe that whoever INEC announces as the winner of the election, we see no need to go to court again. But when that trust has been breached between the electoral body and the electorate, you see that people now heading to court to challenge the decision of INEC in court, even though it's in our law that instead of you to resort to what we call violence, taking law into your hands, why can't you go to court and let court address the issue? But to me, before we don't see something like this, but before now, in fact, when you look at the case of Ondo State in 2007, Ondo State, Ekiti State, Osun State, and Edo State, it wasn't like this. In Edo State, 2007, between Oshiomhole and Osubo, Court of Appeal gave it to Oshiomhole. Tribunal gave it to Oshiomhole. Court of Appeal again affirmed the decision of Tribunal, gave it to Oshiomhole. In Ondo State, Court of Appeal Court, Tribunal gave it to Mimiko. Court of Appeal in Bini gave it to Mimiko again. In Ekiti State, Tribunal gave it to Fayemi. I'm talking about Fayemi now, case between Fayemi and Segun 2007. Gave it to Fayemi. Going to appeal court in Ilorin, they gave it to Fayemi again. In Osun State, 2007 between Aregbesola and Oyilola, Tribunal gave it to Aregbesola. Appeal court again gave it to Aregbesola. But what we've seen now, it does like politics. We perform respect to judiciary. It's like politics is now setting in now into judiciary system, and I think that's why we have segment of court in Nigeria. When you go to tribunal, if you are not pleased with the judgment of tribunal, you go to appeal court. If you are not pleased with what appeal court giving, then you go to Supreme Court. Now let me give an example in line with the question you asked, Ezekiel. Let me give a clear example of what happened in Osun, very close to us now. You know, in the case between Adeleke and Oyetola. Now you see that at the tribunal level gave it to Oyetola, the former governor of the state, based on the result found on the INEC IREV that shows that multiple voting, because IREV has to complete the uploading before APC went there now to get the result. But at the appeal court said that no, you have to give it to Adeleke, and at the Supreme Court affirmed the decision of appeal court. Now we can't totally blame the judiciary system, because when you look at appeal court is being consulted by some judges, but they believe that those justices, their level and their disposition to law cannot be equated to those at the appeal court. Now when you go to appeal court, we have senior lawyers and senior justices who do just a kind of good interpretation into what happened from the tribunal court. But when you go to Supreme Court, we believe that justices at the Supreme Court, they have the full understanding. And when you look at Supreme Court don't entertain any kind of witnesses. But at the tribunal and the appeal court, you can go with your witnesses. You want to go with ballot papers, everything, people can go there and witness. But at the Supreme Court, Ezekiel, nothing like witnesses. They based on technicality at the Supreme Court. That's what they deal with at Supreme Court. They will not allow you to come and entertain any witness. No, that they don't do that at Supreme Court. But at the Supreme Court, what they deal with is technicality. And they look at the case from the tribunal, they look at the case at the appeal court, then they now look at it from the angle of the constitution and the angle of the precedents. Now, let me give you a clear example. In the case between Bola Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar and Obi in the just concluded 2023 presidential election, you could see that at the Supreme Court, Atiku went ahead to obtain certificates from Chicago University, tendered at the Supreme Court. Well, no, you can't do that. You can only do that at the appeal court, because at the Supreme Court, anything you don't file at the ab initio, at the initial of your case, you can't entertain at the Supreme Court. Now, when you look at the case of Kano, the case of Kano at the appeal court generated a lot of national and constitutional controversies. What do I mean by that? When the verdict was given at the appeal court upheld the decision of tribunal that sacked Governor Yusuf of NAPP. But when the lead counsel of Yusuf was reading that particular judgment, and the Attorney General of Kano State, he discovered that the written judgment quite different from the pronouncement of the appeal court, because we got to understand that what we have at the written of the appeal court, that they upheld the election of the Governor Yusuf on NPP, but in giving the verdict verbally, they gave another thing that contradicted what they have inside the appeal court written. At the end of the day, they dragged that down to Supreme Court. Now Supreme Court now gave that no, because what APC challenged the NPP is that they talked about multiple voting, that there were multiple voting, that they need to subtract this and this, and that was the case between Hope Uzodinma and AC and PDP in the governorship, in the 2019 governorship election in Imo State. Don't forget, in Imo State 2019, Hope Uzodinma came forth at that particular election, but he challenged the election in court. At the end of the day, the Supreme Court gave back the verdict to Hope Uzodinma. On the issue of that, Hope Uzodinma challenged the result that brought in the PDP, Emeka Ihedioha, to office, that there was a multiple rigging. And after subtracting a lot of votes from that of Ihedioha and PDP, now at the end of the day, discover that Hope Uzodinma vote now override that of PDP in Imo State. So that was what APC challenged the election of Governor Yusuf of Kano State under NPP. But at the end of the day, Supreme Court said that no, you can't. There's nothing like multiple voting, and they upheld the election of Governor Yusuf in Kano State. Now back to Plateau State, because these two governorship elections now generated constitutional and national controversies. Now going to Plateau State, don't forget that in Plateau State, when former Minister of Labour and Employment, now Minister now Lalong now, for Plateau State, he lost that governorship election. No, although he did not contest, but APC contested that particular election. Now, when you look at the judgment of the National Assembly in Plateau State, they removed that of PDP, National Assembly Senator. Now they returned Governor Lalong former governor of Plateau State and former Minister of Labour and Employment. Now, because in the case, don't forget that in the case of Governor Muftrang, Appeal Court said that he did not win that particular election. And that was why he headed to Supreme Court to get the final verdict. On getting to Supreme Court, we got another interpretation from Supreme Court. So to me, the issue of Kano and Plateau State, to me, is supposed to be a kind of academic exercise in the future litigation, that whatever we are doing, we must ensure that we do it in a kind of transparent manner, because now it does look like a judiciary is going into politics. Exactly. Or politicians are just trying to get into judiciary in such a way that if you don't belong to this particular particular caucus, it's probably for judiciary now to wish you away from your election.
Still on the basis of politics. I know you're not a politician,
exactly.
So I wouldn't mind if you want to skip the question anyways. The thing is, just immediately after President Tinubu became president, he emerged the president, there was a handshake between Kwankwaso and Mr. President. Now, many believe there is more to that smiles and that handshake. Now, do you believe there is something, for the fact where NNPP tend to retain power in Kano State? Do you think there's possibly strings attached to that handshake, and that's why that is causing NNPP to actually retain power? Because by all means, people tend to believe being the ruling party, APC, and seeing how it went, or it all went down with the Court of Appeal, maybe the APS Court should at least, see reasons with that and all that. But I know you're not a politician. But
you see, Ezekiel, before I answer that question, after the judgment, someone came out, I think Omoyele Sowore came out on social media to say that judgment from Supreme Court, the Supreme Court tried to prevent crisis in Kano. Don't forget that.
Talks that actually.
Don't forget that before that Supreme Court verdict, Kano was an eye tension that if the judgment should go other way around. We saw what happened when the Appeal Court, when they nullified the election of Governor Yusuf of NNPP, violence broke out in Kano. That took a lot of intervention to subside that particular violence. So people were like, the judiciary tried to play a very smart game in deciding that Kano verdict, that had it been in went the other way around, that would have been a problem in Kano. But let's go by the statistics of of presidential election in Nigeria. Kwankwaso is from Kano State. And during that presidential election, he won Kano. Don't forget, in 2015, in 2019 respectively, APC won presidential election in Kano State. Don't forget that Kwankwaso happens to be the former governor of Kano State, former Minister of Defense under President Obasanjo, and I think former Deputy Governor now in that particular. So nobody can wish away his political status in Kano State. In fact, before that presidential election, there was a permutation that Kwankwaso will retain Kano. If at all we will not win other states, but that particular Kano, that he will retain that particular state, being his state and being a kind of political figure in Kano. When you look at Kano politics is standing on a tripod. Kwankwaso fashion, Ganduje's fashion, and Shekarau fashion. So these are the three key political actors in Kano that you cannot wish their political antecedent away in Kano. And at the end of that presidential election, Kwankwaso retained Kano. He defeated Bola Ahmed Tinubu. He defeated Atiku Abubakar in that particular Kano. And people were like, what happened during the presidential election will repeat itself during the governorship election. And what did we see during the governorship election? We saw NNPP candidates won that particular election. And let me tell you, Ezekiel, when you look at Kano, when you sample people's opinion on Kano's election, they will tell you that they themselves knew that NNPP will retain Kano because of what happened during the presidential election, as against what happened in Lagos State. In Lagos State, Peter Obi of LP won the presidential election. As a matter of fact, that was what gave it this kind of morale to Labour Party governorship candidate Rival in Lagos State that he will defeat Babajide Sanwo-Olu and so on and so forth. And we're like, no, that you can't compare presidential election with governorship election. In most cases, presidential election being decided by personality. We don't like the presidential candidate, we like this, and that was how it went in Lagos State. Now, going back to Kano, everybody knew that NNPP won that particular election in Kano State. Free, fair, and credible election. So when the election was challenged in court, and the tribunal gave verdict in supporting of APC as the duly elected candidate of that particular election, you know, Governor Yusuf went to appeal court to challenge the court. At the appeal court again, the appeal court upheld the decision of tribunal in upholding the election of that of APC candidate, and they went to Supreme Court. Thank God that constitution has been amended. Before, you know, I cited 2007 governorship election. Before, governorship election always ended at the appeal court. They don't proceed to Supreme Court. But latest now, the law has been amended that they have the right now to proceed down to the Supreme Court. But what I'm saying is that I've said it here and I'll continue to say it. Ezekiel, you can't separate politics from governance. You say now, whatever you see happening, going on, there's a kind of handshake between one political party and another. Even though Kwagwaso have come out now to debunk that there's nothing like handshake.
Right. Are you agreeing?
Let me go to this one. All right, you said we cannot separate politics and the judiciary.
Exactly.
Okay, let's even accept that. Now, you said a lot of things while you were talking. You also made mention of there were everybody could see clearly that NNPP won
that
Kano.
particular, yes.
But before we got to the Supreme Court, there were a lot of verdict that was passed right from the appeal to the other courts that the case was taken to. Now, if I will ask you now, before the verdict of the Supreme Court, which took place some days back, did you see any surprises coming? And if the surprises came, especially when you said most people believe that NNPP won Kano.
Yes.
But before we got to Supreme, a lot of things had happened,
Yes.
a lot of uproar had happened.
Yes.
Now, some people also claim that, as you said earlier, to that because of some chaos that might possibly happen, that was why the verdict was passed in favor of the NNPP. Now, with all this put in one whole and being considered, did you see any surprise from the verdict that was passed from the 8 states? And if any surprise came as of what was in the constitution and what we believe that was supposed to be passed, where was it being spotted?
Michael, I did not see any surprise because during that preparation for that 8-stage verdict, I think Kano happens to be the only one that caught our attention in all these verdicts. Everybody knew that Sanwo-Olu will retain Lagos State. We all knew that Muftuan will retain Plateau State, because when we look at the dimension of 2023 presidential election, I said it and I continue to say it. Happens to be an election that at least we can give some kudos to INEC. An election that the sitting governor couldn't win re-election, Zamfara there. Matter why they don't win his re-election in Zamfara State. A lot of governors, they lost their senatorial bid. Ben Ayade lost his own in Cross River State. Some governors, Samuel, good, thank you. Samuel Otom lost his senatorial bid. You understand now? So when you look at 2023 general election, I think it came as a kind of renewed hope of Nigerians in the electoral body INEC. But in the EU of Kano, like I said, I was a little bit tensed when I was like, Supreme Court will give verdict. Let's see what Supreme Court will give, because and I'm continuing to say it, that election did not go the way people were expecting it to go. It will have been another chaos in Kano State. You understand now? Because when appeal court, when they delivered their judgment that Governor Yusuf should be sacked from office, that Governor Yusuf did not win that election, we saw what happened in Kano. People went to street to tell you that they voted, and the person they voted for happens to be Yusuf of NNPP. So that was when people started talking about, does it mean that we are trying to see some arcade game in judiciary system? Does it mean that some people are trying to play judiciary in such a way that they can go or they can swing the justice in their own side? So that was when people started talking, thinking, and believing that it's like judiciary is under the control of the political class in this country. And people were like, judiciary should do the needful. And when the case now moved to the Supreme Court, and Supreme Court gave day that we're going to pass verdict on the estate, including Kano, all eyes then were on Kano State, that let's see what will happen in Kano State, because Kano State, you know, apart from Lagos State, Kano State happens to be a kind of a state that we can classify under a metropolitan city, because I've been to Kano before, and you could see that Kano, in fact, we have a lot of number of Nigerians that are in Kano. And when you look at Kano again, like I said now, that Kano politics is sitting on a tripod on Ganduji's factor, on Kwankwaso factors, and Shekaran factor. Both are former governors of that particular state, and both, three of them are former governors, three of them are former ministers of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Now, people were like, judiciary must do the right thing in the issue of Kano. And I'm happy that at the end of the day, the verdict of Supreme Court met the expectation of many Nigerians, especially the people of Kano. Although some people are giving another notion that that verdict was given just to prevent violence, to prevent breaking of law and order in Kano State. But again, go back to that particular election in Kano State, because what PDP said in court was that majority of the ballot papers they were used to vote for NAPP were not stamped and were not signed by INEC. Now, what the law says, what the electoral act says is that, even though, because I've worked with INEC very well, when you hear a ballot paper, you must sign it, append your signature as the presiding officer, stamp it, and so on and so forth. So PDP came out with some ballot papers. They were not signed, they were not stamped by INEC officials that conducted that particular election, and those ballot papers were in support, were voted in support of NAPP candidate. But the council to NAPP challenged that in court, that when you look at the ballot papers happens to be a symbol of INEC. So when you see this particular ballot paper, automatically you know that this one belongs to Independent National Electoral Commission. The question you should ask, that you see that each ballot paper for each state, they have their different code, they have their different numbers. Is this ballot paper belongs to Kano State? If answer is yes, good. And within each state, each local government, when you are conducting election, you see the ballot paper, for example, in Odo West now, the ballot paper that will be used in Ozo West will be quite different from ballot paper that will be used in Odo East. Now, look at the code of this particular local government. Is it in line with the code given by INEC? If the answer is yes, then why are you not talking about that the ballot paper were not stamped and were not signed? No, this was the argument of Chief Wolalanipeco, SAN, who happens to be the lead counsel of the NAPP candidate in the Supreme Court. So at the end of the day, people were like, Supreme Court must give the verdict to NPP, because NAPP won that particular election in Kano without any issue. In fact, it got to a point, people started pointing accusing fingers to AAPC under Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Ganduje, that they want to take Kano at all costs, that it's a must for them to take Kano. Sure. So politics started playing in the issue of Kano. But at the end of the day, Supreme Court gave that verdict on technicality. I said it is only Supreme Court that do give verdict based on technicality. They don't need any witness, you don't need to come with any witness, and so on and so forth. They will look at the verdict from the tribunal down to the appeal court, then they come in with the constitution and what has happened in the past in relation to that particular case. That's what Supreme Court will use to give the verdict on that particular. So exactly what we saw in Kano.
If you have to go by what you are saying now, you know, when we talk about verdict, is a two-way thing.
Yes.
It's a two-faced coin. Right? When it favors you, you applaud the law and say, yes, they have done the right thing. And when it's not going with you, you feel like you've been cheated. Now, on these cases that we have, 8 states, of course, so many people will come out and say, yes, the Supreme Court has done the best. And so many will say, no, it's not fine. Now, some people believe that when we talk about the election petition cases, there are some amendment that needs to be done in our constitution. Do you share the same view? And if yes, where do you think we need to work on?
I think we've done that amendment before, Micheal and our concern, because when you look at it before, it will take 3 years for court to decide who happens to be winner of that particular election or not. When you look at Edo State, and that's what led to off-season election in Edo, Ekiti, Osun, and Ondo, because in Edo, it took the court 3 years to decide who won that particular election in 2007. The same thing in Ondo, the same thing in Osun and Ekiti. But now, within 6 months or 3 months, we are done with everything. But I think what people are calling for now that we need to amend is that this issue of deciding the case where you have a governor already taking the oath of office. That's what people are saying, that can we have a kind of amendment in our law in such a way that after conducting the election, before the winner has been declared by INEC, we take the oath of office? Can we conclude all post-election litigations down to Supreme Court, so that by that time we will know who to be sworn into office and not to be sworn into office? But today now in Nigeria now, we see practice what we call this after election. You see the candidate being declared by INEC, taking the oath of office, and you see that it's very difficult now to upturn any governorship election. If I want to look at all these cases decided now, none of the governorship election was upturned. None. All of them affirmed by Supreme Court. Now again, that's why we are saying that if we can do justice to that, especially in the area of presidential election in Nigeria, no people will be talking that since 2003, Obasanjo election was challenged in court. Obasanjo took oath of office before Supreme Court gave the verdict, and Supreme Court upheld the election of Obasanjo. In 2007, it was a case between late Yar'Adua, Musa Yar'Adua, and Muhammadu Buhari. That election ended at the Supreme Court after Yar'Adua taking the oath of office as the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. In 2011, Jonathan was taken to court in 2011. At the end of the day, Jonathan took oath of office before Supreme Court decide what happened. In 2015, we did not see any presidential litigation in office because Jonathan considered defeat before even official announcement of that particular result. In 2019, we saw the case between Buhari and Atiku Abubakar. Buhari already took the oath of office before Supreme Court gave verdict on that particular election. In 2023, a case between Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Peter Obi, a case between Bola Ahmed Tinubu and Atiku Abubakar, a case between Bola Ahmed Tinubu and the candidate of APM. Bola Tinubu already taken to the oath of office before Supreme Court giving verdict of that particular. So what Nigeria said that, can we amend that, because we need to amend constitutions and the electoral act if we want to be having this verdict before the swearing in. So people believe that if we can amend our laws in such a way that when you are being declared winner of the particular election and that election is being challenged in court, before the final verdict of that particular election, you will be here to take the oath of office, so that people believe that will give judiciary a kind of free hand to operate, because they believe that it won't be easy for a governor, in fact, a governor of Benue State, earlier the election was also challenged in court. For a person to have been a governor for some months, at the end of the day, you are saying that the person is no more a governor of a particular state. We saw it in Nimos in 2019 between Ekedia of PDP and Opus Odimo of APC. So what Nigeria is saying that let's amend our laws, and it's in the hands of our National Assembly, because they are the lawmakers. They are the one that can alter the constitution. They are the one that can amend the law. So let's see whether they will be able to amend our constitution in such a way that after election, before any candidates being taking the oath of office, all litigations will have been concluded by judiciary. Then we know whether you will take the oath of office or not, because this thing now is causing problem in our democratic system of government. You know, before Bayelsa 2023 governorship election, the candidate of APC, that former minister, was in this EU of called EU. I'm talking about Timipe Siva, because we won the election. Was in a particular year, he was removed from office by Supreme Court. Again, he contested that particular election. He won again, and he was removed by Supreme Court. So what I said is that if we can amend our laws in such a way that after election, let's have all court cases done before we conduct a swearing in. But as it is today, after election, you see candidate be declared by INEC, taken to office, moving around maybe as a governor, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, it will not be difficult, because to me now it's now becoming difficult now for Supreme Court now to say that you being a governor for some months, you have to lead that particular office for another person to come, because we have to look at the cost that is on our electoral system in Nigeria. Because when the governor is in office, he has been there for maybe 3 months, 6 months, and you say he's no more a governor. What about salary he has collected for about 6 months, 3 months, and they don't say that all salary collected, that one is for you have to go home with that particular money. So to me, the best way to do now is to ensure that we amend our constitution and our laws in such a way that after election, let all court cases be decided by court before we conduct our swearing in. I think that would be the best way now to go in this system, because like what we saw in 2007, 2011, and 2015 now, we did not see 2023. And I was like, all governors now being returned by Supreme Court, even though we have some governors that appeal court said that they should leave office, they should vacate office. Plateau State appeal consider that it should vacate office. Kano State appeal consider that it should vacate office, and so on and so forth. But Supreme Court came out to say that no, you can't vacate this particular office because based on the technical judgment, you won that particular election. So again, it's raising a lot of concern under our judiciary. That doesn't mean that our judiciary have been biased now, or doesn't mean that our judiciary now has been influenced by political actors in such a way that they will pay judges in such a way that judgment will go in their favor. I think, but if you ask me in summary now, I think all the judgments that we saw few days ago, I think is good for our democracy, because I don't know how it would be for someone to have been in office for some months and you just say that he should leave that particular office for another person to come in. So it's going to be a kind of setback to our democratic system of government, and going to be a kind of setback, and again it will jeopardize the credibility of INEC, because when INEC should conduct an election and usually see that INEC, the election conducted by you, we have to set that particular election aside and we have to bring another person in, because Nigeria is talking about that INEC is not even the one now that is determining who wins or who loses any election. That is judiciary now that is determining who wins or loses election. But by and large now, I think we are moving forward and we are making progress. So so we tend to see a kind of more judicial and electoral transparency in Nigeria in such a way that after this, in fact, if we continue on this trajectory, nobody will go to court again. I'm telling you, because nobody will waste the money again. Because after wasting your money to Supreme Court, at the end of the day, Supreme Court will tell you that you did not win that election because INEC did not declare you winner of that particular election. The person declared winner by INEC happens to be the winner of that person. So when it gets to a point, people will see no need now to continue going on litigation after election again.
Now, the truth is, you used a very nice word. So as regarding my last questions as to whether or not there was a little frolicking between the president or Mr. Okonkwo. So I know you used words like politics, maybe the judicial system tend to have a way to play. I want a candid reply. Do you believe there was some sort of frolicking between, or it was?
Ezekiel, I wasn't there. You understand? So I wasn't. So I can't give a direct verdict now because I wasn't there.
But you believe nonetheless, the politics and the system, you know, justice system tend to have one or two play.
Who appointed justices? Politicians.
All right.
So that's my summary.
Definitely, we are out of time. Definitely, if you say so, definitely. I think it's more of whoever that is your payer can just dictate whatever is going to come out of you.
Like they say, whoever pays the price takes the two. But just before we go, and
that's why we are saying that we need to give the judiciary that independence. That the appointment of this officer in Nigeria should not be done by the president. Let it come from the Judicial Council. So let no executive have any interference. But when you are the governor, okay, governor of a state now, they are the one that appoint the chief justice of the state. Mr. President is the one that appoints the justice of Nigeria. So politicians are the one appointing these people to come to office. But I'm not saying here that judiciary is being influenced by politicians. But what I'm saying is that politicians appoint those who give that.
All right, thank you very much for coming on the program.
Thank you, Ezekiel, and Micheal, for having me.
All right, politics, judiciary, they work hand in hand. We cannot separate them. Also, in his word, he believes there was no frolicking. It was just what it's supposed to be. That's what has come out as the verdict. As Nigerians, the judiciary is our last bus stop, and when we get verdicts from there, let us stay with it and become peaceful and do whatever we need to do to move Nigeria as a nation forward. From here, we'll be handing over to our Lagos studio, which we believe they have more beautiful package to give to you. I remain Micheal Obagiri.
Well, for me, I think the major point in this discussion this morning was as regarding reformations. I think our judicial system, our electoral system need a overhaul, you know, a total turn when it comes to reformation of bill. Now, we had the issue of, you know, the Plateau State event where Mofuong and other National Assembly members had the same issue. The Court of Appeal tended to notify them, but I think the governor was lucky enough to go down to the Apex Court, or should I say legality actually permitted him to go down to the Apex Court, and then his justice was upheld. I think at some point we get to a point where we'd actually try to, you know, focus, you know, tend to touch, maybe give a retweet where maybe National Assembly members could have the opportunity to maybe go to the Apex Court and then tend to get justice. But nonetheless, I think we are heading towards the right direction. Like Analyst rightly said, of course, have a wonderful day ahead. I remain Ezekiel Ogar.